Assalamu alaikum, welcome to Questions on British Muslim TV with me, Mohammed Shafiq, in the new time of 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon. This is the run-up and throughout Ramadan, and then inshallah after Eid, we're back at our normal time of 8:30. We're broadcasting on Sky Channel 752 and across social media at the handle British Muslim TV. Wherever you are joining us, a very warm welcome. Now, we want to hear your thoughts and experiences on the stories we're featuring. Call us now on 01924 231 083 or on the WhatsApp number, which is on the screen now. Let's give you the latest UK updates on the lockdown. First, I want to just tell you about the breaking news that's just come in the last 30 minutes or so. The Joint Committee of Vaccination and Immunisation have announced that adults aged between 18 and 29 who do not have an underlying health condition should be offered an alternative to the AstraZeneca Oxford University vaccine. This is because there seems to be a very small number of people who get blood clots, and so therefore the guidance based on the evidence that has been considered is that if there's another jab available, Pfizer, Moderna, which started today, then they should be given that. So that's the breaking news that's come out of the Joint Committee of Vaccination and Immunisation that's been giving a briefing in the last hour. We know that over 32 million people now have had their first dose of the vaccine across the United Kingdom, with over 5 million having their second dose. The figures for deaths within 28 days of a positive test result has now reached the sad milestone of 126,826. The bigger news announced on Friday was that Bangladesh and Pakistan would be added to the rest list countries where British and Irish passport holders would be expected to pay £1,750 to stay in a quarantine hotel before being allowed to travel home. Now, this has caused lots of worry for the thousands of stranded in Pakistan and Bangladesh who are trying to get home before 4 a.m. on Friday morning when the new rules come in. I said at the weekend on social media that the decision to add Pakistan and Bangladesh doesn't make any sense in terms of science or logic. Next door in India, they're averaging 80,000 cases. Well, when I wrote this script on the weekend, there was 80,000. It's now gone up to 100,000 cases per day. But they were left off the red list. Across Europe, in France, Italy, Germany, the positive rates are in the 30,000s. Yet flights are still running to the United Kingdom. It defies logic, and we will have to see what happens over the days to come. We'll keep an eye on that. In other news, the former Crown Prince of Jordan, Prince Hamza bin Hussein, has claimed he is under house arrest as part of a crackdown on critics in which he claims he is not a part of. In a leaked video to the BBC, he accuses the country's leaders of corruption, incompetence and harassment. The military earlier denied Prince Hamza was under house arrest, and he has since shared a letter which he signed pledging his allegiance to the King Abdullah of Jordan and his Crown Prince. Now, Christians around the world last weekend celebrated Easter with Pope Francis taking part in a service behind closed doors. For a second time due to the pandemic, there was an invited guest of 200 people in the service. French President Emmanuel Macron has announced that France has now entered its third national lockdown as it sees a surge in cases of the COVID-19 that has threatened to overwhelm hospitals around the nation. Currently, there's a peak of about 5,000 COVID patients in intensive care. Last Friday, France recorded 46,677 new cases and 304 deaths. Now, Muslims around the world are getting ready to welcome the holy month of Ramadan next week. The month of fasting is a time of reflection, prayer, charity and family. And this year, like last year, will be under COVID restrictions around people not being able to visit each other's homes for iftari or sehri. Indoor meetings are banned until May the 17th at the earliest. Shortly, we head to Birmingham to talk to Surwat Sohail, the founder of Roshni Birmingham, about the Home Office campaign titled "You Are Not Alone," looking to highlight domestic violence. Surwat joins us live shortly. Then we head to London to talk to Caolan Robertson about his powerful story of his journey from the far right alongside the EDL, Tommy Robinson, to becoming now an anti-racist campaigner. It is a must-watch to see how the far right groom and brainwash people in this country. And in the final segment of the programme, we discussed with Imran Shah from the Muslim Public Affairs Committee, MPACUK, the aftermath of the Batley Grammar School cartoon row. So we want to hear from you tonight, or should I say it this afternoon. You can call us on 01924 231 083. You can message us on British Muslim TV across social media. Send us a WhatsApp message. The number is on your screen. The questions we're considering today. What impact has the lockdown had on domestic violence? How can we counter the far right? And was a school teacher that showed an offensive cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wrong? Or do you support the teacher's right to show this or any other image? That number again is 01924 231 083, or messages on WhatsApp. The number is on the screen as I keep telling you. So please share your thoughts. Let's start with our first topic. In April 2020, the Home Office launched the You're Not Alone campaign in response to an unprecedented rise in calls from domestic abuse victims during the beginning of lockdown. With national restrictions and social distancing measures increasing isolation and vulnerability, the campaign sought to highlight that help and support is available to anyone who is at risk or experiencing domestic violence. Now, with the introduction of the third lockdown at the start of January, there is a need to maintain momentum and continue to raise awareness of options available to victims and their families during this challenging time, while also continuing the discussions and education around domestic abuse and the different forms it takes to maintain public vigilance. The third lockdown has continued to take its toll on victims, and even as the end is potentially coming into sight, concerns have risen over a prospective surge in high-risk cases and high domestic abuse incidents, which are expected once restrictions lift due to the expected attempts at separation. Roshni Birmingham supports Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities affected by domestic violence, including forced marriage and honour-based abuse since 1979. I'm really pleased that the CEO of Roshni, Surwat Sohail, is joining us live on British Muslim TV from Birmingham in the West Midlands. Surwat, a very warm welcome to the programme. It's a privilege to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me here today.
Let's get down to it. How's the pandemic been for you and your family?
I think the work pressure has been, because we've seen, what we thought was a 300% rise to begin with. But analysing the figures yesterday, we realised that last year our figures for overall services was approximately 154. This year, just within 6 months, it was 575. We've had a huge increase in our cases. It's resulted in a lot of additional pressure on staff to be able to manage those caseloads. We've been privileged that, a lot of the MOJ, the MHCLG and various other funders came forward, provided the support for us to increase the service provision to meet that additional need. And we're pleased to say that we didn't turn anyone away. And a lot of this support has also come through a lot of the campaigns that the government has undertaken, in particular this You Are Not Alone campaign. Because I think very early the Home Office realised that the numbers are increasing quite significantly.
I'm just going to ask you on that.
But also,
I don't know if, can you hear me? So sorry, I'm just going to ask you a bit more. Tell us a bit more about that government campaign, You're Not Alone.
As I said, obviously in March, we started to see an increase in the number of calls to our helplines. But what was actually quite alarming was that a lot of people thought that the services are closed. That was during the first lockdown. So they were not reaching out to the normal services, for example, refuge provision or outreach. And it was at that point he felt the need to get the information out. But how do we get the information out to people when schools are shut? All the mainstream services are closed. So we had to then look at ways that we can take the information into people's homes. Hence, we looked at media, for example, the TV channels. We also use the social media. And this is exactly what the Home Office have done, is to get the information. You are not alone. Okay, you might be isolated in terms of not being able to see your friends, but there is help out there. We have got services that are open 24 hours a day. We've had victims who can't call during the day because the perpetrator's home. They've called us 2 o'clock in the morning. That's okay with us because we understand how difficult it is for people to reach out to us. So we are there 24 hours. Whenever you get a moment that you can actually reach out for help, we are there for you.
Okay, I'm just conscious because we've got very little time with you and you're very busy. So if I do interrupt, I apologise in advance. It's just I'm really keen to get some of those key messages out. Just sorry to ask this question, but what is domestic abuse?
Sorry, what is?
Domestic abuse.
Okay, domestic abuse takes many forms. So it could be physical abuse, it could be mental abuse, it could be coercive control, it could be financial abuse where you're not given, so your money is taken away from you, you're not given enough to survive on. It could be where you're constantly belittled, told you're no good. You know, a lot of the time we have women who are saying that, you know, they used to taunt me saying you're black, you're dark, you're no good to cook, you can't do anything, you're completely useless. So domestic violence can take many forms.
Yeah. And what are the signs for those of us, allies, if you like, of women, family members? What are the signs to look out for in terms of domestic violence?
The signs really are that a lot of the time it's your friends, it's your people that you know. A sudden change in their behavior should alert you that something has gone wrong, and ask the question, how are you? Are you okay? It could range from somebody who suddenly says, well, I'm getting married, but from their face, you can see that they're not very happy. You may have bruises somebody's trying to hide. Okay, when you ask them, they're giving you explanations which don't add up, because you wouldn't get a bruise for what they're saying that resulted in the abuse. So there's many signs you can look. You may even see somebody actually belittling them in front of you. In many cases, it does happen. The person may seem quite withdrawn, not wanting to speak. So again, you know, the list is very long, but it's really down to the fact that you will notice a change in the people you know.
Yeah, and having that relationship and understanding, you'll see the difference between the two. So stay with us. I know we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll carry on this very important conversation around domestic violence and the pandemic, and how we can help all of you men out there. How can we be better allies for our women, our sisters? Join us on the other side of these important messages. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. Our special guest, Surwat Sohail, is still there. Let me put my teeth back in. Surwat, we were just talking before the break about the telltale signs, but why is it so important for people like you, but people like me, and many people, prominent people within the British Muslim community, speak out about domestic violence and these issues?
I think, you know, everybody has the right to live free of violence and fear. Okay. And the question is, would you like your daughters to, you know, go through what somebody else is going through? It's our basic human right to live without fear, live without violence. And we as a community have an obligation to ensure that, you know, it's not just about women, it's not just about men, but as a society, we should play our role. If you're a mother-in-law and you're seeing your son mistreating the daughter-in-law, please do speak out. If you're seeing your son, that he may be speaking to other girls in the family at a young age in a certain way, as a mother, we do have a responsibility to say to our sons, this is wrong. It's about respect, whether that's a male or a female, respecting each other. It's that basic respect that we must teach, and that needs to start from your own home. How do you treat other people?
Yeah, that's really important.
Once we get that right, we will start to see the change, but it needs to be at every direction that we need to be hitting, not just it's the woman's responsibility.
Yeah. We're taking your calls now. Lines are open, 01924231083. You can get in touch with us also on social media, British Muslim TV. If you're watching this on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you are, you're very welcome indeed. Please do share your thoughts with us. Now, Surwat, as part of this You're Not Alone campaign, which the Home Office launched as a result of the pressure that has been put out to tackle this issue, what support is available to people out there who are suffering?
Did you say what resources are available?
Yeah, resources, support available for victims of domestic violence.
Support is very much from somebody who simply wants to talk to someone to find out their option. There's helplines available. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to say who you are. You can simply just ring up and really find out what your options are. Somebody who has taken a decision that they can no longer live in that home, we can help them to leave and get into a refuge. You don't have to go into a refuge. If you say, well, I don't want to go into a refuge, help me to get private tenancy, help me to remain in this house, to look at ways that we can actually try and get the perpetrator out of the house. Again, there's options through our outreach project, we can do that. There's various options. Somebody who's been forced into a marriage, we might be able to help them to get a forced marriage protection order. So you could get non-molestation orders while you're actually living at the property. So really it's down to what does the victim want to do? We are very much victim-led. They make the decisions. We help them to put those into practice. We don't make any decisions on their behalf. So all we do is open up their options, tell them what their options are, and it's their decision what they want to do.
Yeah. And what support's available for those people who don't speak English as their first language? Because we know lots of people...
We cater for all South Asian victims of domestic violence. So we've got workers who speak Urdu, Punjabi, Hindi, even Mirpuri, and also now we're actually expanding to other BME languages as well. For example, we've got a Somalian volunteer who supports us. We've got Romanian, Polish, so various other Arabic. So we are trying to reach out to more and more BME victims of domestic abuse.
Now, what advice is there for victims who are worried about coming forward for support due to concerns about their immigration status? We know lots of women and men who come from abroad to get married and settle here are really scared about speaking up about their experiences and being a victim because they're worried about their immigration status. What reassurances can you provide to them?
Not to be afraid, because 80% of the cases that we have in our domestic violence refuge are women with no recourse to public funds. We've also supported males who are no recourse to public funds, who do not have Home Office, do have a concession that we apply for. 100% of our cases, victims have got the indefinite leave to remain. And in the meantime, we do have the resources to support them financially until 3 weeks is all it's taking us to try and get their benefits sorted. In that time, we support those victims with food. You know, if they need extra funding, we will support them until they get there, until their benefits start.
Yeah, because it's really having to deal with the experience of domestic violence is one thing, but then to think about all the consequences and all the obstacles, and that's why it's so important that Roshni in Birmingham, which is the organisation you're the CEO of, tell us about the journey Roshni's been on since 1979.
Sorry, what was the question? It wasn't very clear. So you've been working with the community since 1979. What's your journey in terms of Roshni? What sort of things are Roshni doing? The journey's a quite interesting one, because we were actually set up by a male social worker who identified that there was lack of support for South Asian women in Birmingham. So he set up the domestic violence refuge. It was one of the very first ones. And we've taken a very long journey, because it started off with just a domestic violence refuge. We then added floating support. Then we added outreach. We then started our helpline for domestic abuse. Then forced marriage and honour-based abuse helpline that we run in partnership with an organisation called SWAN and Panaga in Coventry. And then we now, this year, have started a counselling. It's a domestic abuse counselling, which is delivered in South Asian languages.
Yeah, that's really important. And in essence, just tell us, how can people get involved and support your vital work?
please do get in touch. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under Roshni Birmingham. Do come on board. We've got a volunteer section that, we've currently got 8 volunteers that are supporting us. We're always looking for grand ambassadors. At the moment, we've got Apache Indian. We've got Rocky Takra from EastEnders. And we've also got Rose Maroc, who's the Miss India. Again, and we're always welcoming new faces to our team, onto our board, to strengthen the organisation and provide the much needed support.
Yeah, and what's your advice to people watching this who are quite afraid to reach out for help? What's your advice to them? Advice is,
please do not be afraid to call us. We don't ask for your name. We don't ask for... When you're ready, you can tell us your name. If you want to just ring up and just get some support, find out what your options are, call, give yourself a different name, but do please call our helpline. Can I give the helpline number?
Absolutely, yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so the helpline number is, the domestic abuse helpline number is 0800 953 9666. It's a free phone number. You will not get charged. If you're a forced marriage or honor-based abuse victim, then please call our consortium helpline number, which is 0800 953 9777.
Okay, we've got time to take one call. I know there's quite a few people want to get through, so let's go to Birmingham and talk to his sister there. Assalamu alaikum, you're live on British Muslim TV. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. My name is Saira.
Hello, Saira.
Yeah. I used to be a family support worker and I left work 7 years ago. And people still try to find me to get some information about sort of domestic violence or what's happening. I just had a phone call today from somebody who tried to find me. And they are just saying how the sister is suffering. She's come over from Pakistan. So there's no, I don't think there's much information out there of what people can do. Her sister who's been living here for all her life, and she said, my sister has come with 2 children to my house. She suffered domestic violence. She doesn't know what to do next. So I think the information is still not out there properly, okay, or the right places where it's supposed to be. Because there is, throughout, I worked for 15 years as a family support worker in local schools, and I realized there's so much domestic violence, and it's sort of, I couldn't even believe that in some of the situations that I've been, that could, our own community that could go through that. So it's still, the information needs to be out there a bit more.
Well, I think the fact that we are... Sorry, I'm cutting you off, but we've got less than 2 minutes and I wanted to give my final moments to Surwat. The fact that we're talking about this is important, but we'll come back to this again and again and again. And my final question to you, Surwat, this is not uniquely a BME issue. Domestic violence is massively on an increase in the rest of society as well. And we've all collectively got to do what we can to amplify the voice of victims.
That's absolutely right. Victims can be of all ethnicity, of all age, although when it comes to barriers, they can differ. Okay, the biggest barrier that we find with our South Asian community is, if you leave home, it's an honor issue. Okay, even if it's domestic violence, it's the pressure that's put on that victim. They're made to feel guilty that if they leave, they are the cause of it. Without really, we don't focus on why that person feels forced to leave the violent relationship. But if they leave, they're at fault. That's the biggest barrier. Then language is a barrier. Again, immigration is a barrier. I think that, while everybody does go through domestic abuse, irrespective, not everybody, what I mean that, in terms of race, it could be any background. But what differs is the pressure, the barriers do differ depending on what community you are. Yeah. And it's important for organizations to have understanding of those barriers to enable and support the victims.
Well, Surwat, your organisation, Roshni Birmingham, has been doing some amazing and vital work. We pay tribute to you and your team. I want to wish you well and pray for your continued success. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a break shortly. When we come back, we head to London, where we'll be talking to Caolan Robertson, who, as you may know and may remember, was a far-right activist. He was very close to Tommy Robinson and the EDL, and really kind of professionalised the far-right. He left them and is now an activist against racism. We'll talk about his journey and his experiences. We'll take a break, and then we'll take your calls as well. Join us on the other side of these important messages. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, exclusively here on British Muslim TV. And we had a really powerful interview there with Surwat Sohail, part of the Chief Executive Officer for Roshni Birmingham, the domestic violence and abuse charity that's doing some amazing work. And if you want to find out more, Roshni Birmingham is their Twitter handle. And the numbers which we got, the number for a domestic violence helpline is 0800 953 9666. And from an Islamic perspective, you know, we've got an Islamic duty to stand up against injustice, have we not? In the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says very clearly, stand up against injustice, even if it is against your own kin, against your own family. We should be speaking out. We should be protecting women and men who suffer from this domestic abuse. And if you are a victim, please know that there is support available, and that helpline is available on that number. So please do get in touch and don't suffer in silence. And as ever, if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Shafiq UK for the latest comments in terms of the programme. You can comment, and if you're watching us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram Live, wherever you are, a very warm welcome to the programme. Now, let's move on to our next story. My next guest is a writer. He's a filmmaker and a former PR person for the far right. During 2017 and 2019, he was a correspondent for the far-right rebel media. He was a director and producer for Alex Jones, Lauren Southern, and far-right figurehead Tommy Robinson. And he helped create content for the far right. He says the Orlando Gay Club terrorist attack was where he was radicalised, and he wanted to make a difference. He then began to realise that what he had been doing for 2 years was amplifying that divide and hate. He's working with Future Freedom to de-radicalise other far-right figures and is a director at Byline TV. Caolan Robertson has been on an extraordinary journey, and it's great that he is with me now. Caolan, I'm very pleased you're joining us live from London. Caolan, a very warm welcome to British Muslim TV.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and having this conversation, and and exploring this kind of world and going down this kind of route about talking about how all this works.
Well, let's start off the obvious question. We're living through a pandemic. It's been 1 year. How have you and your family coped?
Not so bad. I started launching sort of Byline TV, which is a video department of Byline Times, a Prince newspaper in London. And it's been very difficult to get things off the ground, get people into the studio and create real world conversations, just because, you know, social distancing and things like that. But it's been okay. I live right in the center of London, and it's strange, but I think a lot of people have it a lot worse at the moment. I've heard really, really terrible stories and covered so much stuff up and down the UK from people that have lost family members and people that have just had really bad mental health implications. So it's been a terrible time for so many people, it seems.
Now, let's start at the beginning. The Orlando Gay Club terrorist attack in the United States, a few years ago. What was it about that attack that made you want to do something?
It wasn't anything afterwards that made me want to do anything. I remember I just had a lot of questions. I wasn't political at that time. I'd never voted before. I was working in PR for different restaurants in London and wasn't engaged in the political system. I came out as LGBT when I was like 13, and I knew that homophobia was something that I didn't like and I thought was awful. But didn't experience a huge amount of it in London after moving to the city. But I remember when that was all over the front pages of the news, I wanted to understand why it happened. Why was America's worst mass shooting at the time carried out by a Muslim extremist in a gay nightclub? It made no, it just, I didn't understand that. I didn't understand anything about Islam. So I went to YouTube to try and figure it out, because that's where I grew up. I grew up on the internet. Like, you know, most people my age, they go to the internet for answers. And the top rated results at that time were Milo Yiannopoulos, who's a sort of far-right provocateur, and he was doing this gay kiss-off with Gavin McGuinness, who's a Rebel Media correspondent, another far-right YouTube channel. And they were saying, see, right-wingers actually are very tolerant of LGBTQ rights, and actually we've been raising the whistle and the flag about problems with incompatibilities with Islam and gay rights the whole time, and we've been predicting this, and we said that this would happen. And it just, I remember after I watched a couple of those videos, I'd never seen anything like that, I got recommended a huge amount more. And they were more expansive about lots of different types of subjects. I'd walk to work listening to them, and they'd be in my inbox from YouTube and bombarded with recommendations. And it was going into why Islam hates women's rights, why Islam hates democracy, why Muslims want Sharia law, and 99% of Muslims want Sharia law. And they were pushing these videos, and it wasn't pushed by sort of, you know, traditional working class looking people. It was pushed by young people, women, people that looked educated. It was pushed by a massively diverse group of people that had millions and millions of views, and it felt legitimate. And after months of consuming that content endlessly and being recommended that content, we had the rise of Trump. Trump was elected. 50% of people basically thought that it was okay for him to exist, which authenticated those views. He held up the gay flag and said, I'll protect this community from a toxic, hateful ideology. That made sense to me after watching all these videos. So it was really, really YouTube at the heart of this. And then we had a spate of terror attacks across Europe. You know, you had France and France's worst terror attack, all sort of happening after this time. And it felt like all of it was kind of really heightened, but it was all on the internet. Yeah, it was all on the internet. Now, just tell us about that connection with Tommy Robinson, the former leader of the EDL. He's claiming that you made the connection with him. Tell us what your version of that history is. So January, Trump gets inaugurated. I quit my job and I decide I want to start making interviews and content, sort of a bit like the Dave Rubin Show, one of these right-wing YouTube shows, having conversations about free speech, cancel culture, Islam, lots of different subjects. But it was quite light at the time. I wasn't really that radical at this point. I was kind of exploring these ideas. And he was one of the people I wanted to interview. So I asked him for an interview, and it was very successful. He said, Caolan, Islam is at war with people from your community, and it's you know, all my friends are black and the media are lying about me and I'm not racist. And he was very, very convincing. And I was hired by his boss, Erjul Levant, the founder of Rebel Media, to work with him on camera and to do all these videos. But he was very, very charming, and he really played a lot of it back. And at that time, he didn't have a big public profile. It had been years since he left the EDL and Quilliam. And so he was really sort of quiet, and I didn't really know who he was. I grew up in Southern Ireland, so the EDL wasn't something I knew about, but very, very charming, very well received on the internet. The only thing that he would talk about was, well, we're talking about religion, religious fundamentalism as an ideology. We're not demonizing people. We're not demonizing race. It's about ideology. But over time, it started to separate, and I started to realize. Really, you've just kind of read my mind in terms of what the next question is. Do you understand now that how absurd that notion is, that I'm against Islam but not Muslims? Yeah, and this is something that he was very, very convincing at pushing, and so many people received it, including me. And it was always about making that point. But behind the scenes, over time, and one of the reasons I pulled away working for him was he would stop making that distinction, and he would start becoming very honest about it and saying, well, actually, it is Muslims. I mean, I remember I was on stage with him the last day I worked with him at an event called Day for Freedom, where I had invited a YouTuber called Ali Dawa, who's a Muslim, and I believed in freedom of speech for everybody. And Tommy said he couldn't come last minute, and actually it's because he's a Muslim and not because of any other reason, because he wasn't invited or because of an ideology. And I really started to realize towards the end that it went hand in hand. The racialization of Islam is a huge part of it. And actually a huge number of his associates and the people that I worked with around him and people in those circles, they start with racism. They start with they just don't like Muslims or people who are, you know, even not white, just generally racist people. And then they use this cover of, well, it's about ideas, it's about ideology, it's about this quote in the Quran, and it's about this quote. And it just is an attempt to soften it. And that's the reason I pulled away from working with him, is because it came from a racist place. Whereas for me, and for a lot of people around me, even though I was radicalized at the time, and I hate that I was part of that system, I genuinely was thinking of it in terms of ideology. But and people who go into those systems end up just becoming more radicalized overall. Yeah,
because you became a mouthpiece for the far right, the influential person who made Tommy Robinson look professional and good in terms of that message, and other far-right people, and many of us, including myself, would be those who were exposing the far right. Do you have any regrets about that and the transformation?
Massive regrets.
That you've been on?
Yeah, when you're in it, you don't think that you're involved in anything that's hateful or racist. I mean, my newsfeed was very, very different to the newsfeed of someone who's a regular person or someone on the left. When hate crimes happen in this country, I don't see that on my newsfeed. Or when they do happen, and maybe it's a hoax like Jussie Smollett, that gets elevated to the top of it by Breitbart and things like that. So you start to doubt it anyway. So you don't think that there's any real world implications for any of this. And it wasn't until I started to see the really ugly side of it, the ugly side of Tommy, and then pulled out and started meeting with Muslim community leaders. Byline Times introduced me to lots of different people who actually explain the real world implications of a lot of this, that I started to feel extreme deep regret for being involved in any of this. That's why now I'm dismantling it in a huge number of ways and exposing people like Tommy and exposing his finances and a lot of this press, because I feel massive remorse for even helping build someone like that, because it's not the thing I thought it was in the beginning, and it's not the thing I thought I was doing at the time.
Well, actually, let me be fair to you. He was a far-right activist before you got involved. And so don't hurt yourself too much by pinning all the blame on yourself. I just said that. Some on the left and some on the right are saying that this is another Caolan marketing exercise. What would you say?
This is probably the worst marketing exercise I could possibly do. It's embarrassing to talk about this stuff, and it puts a target on my head. If I walk down the street now, I used to get recognized by Tommy supporters quite a lot in a very friendly way up until a few months ago, and now it's turning very, very hostile. The only thing that really comes out from talking about this to people in political environments is skepticism and doubt. There's no benefit to me in any way. There's no monetary benefit. The only reason I'm doing it is because I want to actively dismantle the structures and the people that I worked with and take down those reputations and expose those people. There's zero PR benefit for me in any way. There's no job opportunity from it. There's nothing. It actually paints a really, really bad target on my back, and it's put me at massive risk. Tommy has made countless videos against me recently. And yeah, I mean, people who question that need to look at how I could possibly benefit from putting myself in that situation. You know, there's no glossy side to it. It's extremely difficult. And I'm doing it just to expose the far right.
I promise you we're going to move on and talk about all the positive stuff that you're doing, Caolan. Just one final question. Milo, who you will know of, wrote a very long piece trying to expose you. What do you say to people like him?
So that made me realize that I was leaving a cult. I texted Milo a month before I left, which was around the time of Christchurch. And I said, I'm pulling back. I don't really want to be involved in a lot of this stuff anymore. Tommy turned out to be a different person in real life. He had advocated for much more extreme ideas. I sent the same text out to everybody else, and they responded with extreme hostility. They were terrified that I would walk away and expose them. They thought I might have recordings of them saying really incriminating things. And it was a mad rush to discredit me. And I spoke to cult leaders recently, ex-cult members recently, who have basically said that the same sort of stuff happened to them. There's a campaign to discredit them as soon as they walk away, because former people have the potential to tear down those systems.
Caolan, just stay there, sorry, because we're going to go for a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with Caolan Robertson. Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq. My special guest is Caolan Robertson. Caolan, just before the break, we were talking about all those far-right figures who seem to now be taking pops at you because you kind of left the cult as you described it. Let's just talk about one final point about the fact that you now realise, do you not, that there is bad in every community and that you don't hold communities responsible for the actions of a small minority.
I mean, yeah, there was a huge ideological shift walking away from this stuff. I was on the receiving end of an incredible amount of polarization and like indoctrination and misinformation on my newsfeed every single day, produced by a very well-funded, massive Islamophobic ecosystem. And it took a long time to really understand that a huge amount of that was nonsense. A huge amount of that actually had to happen by turning off the internet, going outside and speaking to regular Muslims and speaking to people from communities that I had seen demonized, and realizing that it's all just nonsense. Actually, the main moment was when I was in Turkey and I was doing a documentary for Lawrence Southern about the refugee crisis, and we had snuck cameras in and we had waited on the coast for dinghies to arrive to bring the refugees to safety in Europe. And we had been basically indoctrinated to believe that all of these people were angry, fighting, young men, they were going to be aggressive. We had security, we were really nervous, they wanted to invade, they were moving for economic reasons. And the people that emerged at 4 o'clock in the morning through those bushes, literally to my shock, and I know this sounds reasonable to a lot of people, but they were women and children. It was young men, but they said that they wanted to stay, and they desperately needed to go to Europe for safety, and they had nowhere else to go. They had all their belongings in bin bags. They were genuine people fleeing war. And I genuinely didn't realize that this was I had to actually go out into the world and see the stark reality compared to the stuff that's pushed online to millions and millions of young people to understand that it's nonsense. What's one of the main reasons I pulled back? That was the last film I ever made. After that incident. And it basically means you have to switch off the internet, because these people at the top of right-wing ecosystems make everything black and white. They'll have a villain and they'll have a hero, and they're very, very, very convincing, and they'll convince you that entire groups and millions of people are invaders or are evil.
And what was the rationale in your mind as you reflect on your journey to becoming a mainstream person, somebody who's anti-racist, who realizes that they've been conned and they've been groomed into far-right ideology?
Well, the first thing I wanted to do was just to disappear. I felt like I'd caused damage to society. I felt like I'd actively participated in something that was dangerous and toxic, and actually could have even led to a spite in, hate crimes, or a cog in a machine that does that. And I just wanted to disappear and wanted nothing to do with this stuff ever again. But after about a year, I felt like that stuff still exists. I was still getting recognized in the street. There were more radical people, things like, the Capitol storming that happened on the 6th of January. And it felt like I was sort of even part of creating like this monster, or even a small part in that machine. And actually it wasn't enough just to walk away and go and live your life. It's hard to even sleep at night knowing that you were participating in that. And actually it's important to dismantle it and actively work against it. So the work I do every single day with Byline TV, it's actively about disinformation. My most viral video 2 months ago was a fisherman who said that Farage lied to him and he regrets voting Leave. It had 4 million views. It was on everyone's timeline, and that was about disinformation with the Leave campaign. And it's about dismantling the far right and collaborating with Muslim YouTubers, about exposing Tommy Robinson and the hate crimes that they've been on the receiving end of. And also about then the second stage of that, tearing down the people that I worked with and the reputations that I helped build by exposing to their followers exactly who they are, which are people who don't care about them, who profit from them, who laugh at them, who are more racist behind the scenes. I released a video of Alex Jones recently saying he doesn't even care about Donald Trump, never cared in the first place, and just basically does all this for money. And then I released footage of Tommy Robinson, who had selectively edited photos in a fake no-go zone and videos pretending that he was being attacked by a refugee when it was the other way around, and exposed all of his finances with The Independent recently, because people need to know who those people are. And they're not going to believe it if they hear it from the media. If The Independent or The Guardian expose or write negatively about those people, his followers will say, well, that's just because they're left-wing. But if there's proof and there's evidence and it comes directly from someone that was involved in it, it's impossible to argue with that. So I think that's the main reason I'm doing it, is because I was part of it and I want to take it down. Well,
lots of our viewers getting in touch with us now on social media. 0192429231083. Sorry, I'm just totally consumed by our conversation, Caolan. I've totally forgot the number there. But Sohail Afsar saying, hats off to your guest on a courageous move away from the far right. Hope he's successful in unwinding the damage that has been caused by this vile ideology. Ivan Humble, who you will know, who's been a guest on my show, he says he understands how you feel there and solidarity. There's also a conversation coming from Umar, who says, best wishes, Caolan. Really nice to see you in the mainstream. And then, so So you've been very open with your journey, and I thank you for answering those questions. But what was the conversation like with Tommy Robinson? As somebody who's kind of gone head-to-head with him over the years on the media, you know, and to and froing, and being involved in getting him banned from Twitter and Facebook. What was the conversation with him about you leaving and, you know, going back to the mainstream?
I quit working with him before I left working with the far-right ecosystems, because he turned out, you know, what he did with Ali Dawah and with the anti-Muslim stuff, it made me realize that he was actually far more extreme. And I ended up just going and working with Alex Jones, who was just a bit more of a conspiracy theorist, never really spoke about Islam very much. And I just wanted to move away from that. But he was very disappointed. I remember him texting me quite a lot, because all of his videos, you know, the way that he could get away with all of this stuff was because he had good production value, I guess, and because, you know, we made him look good. And we walked away and it all started to collapse and fall apart, and he lost his social media, and, you know, he started freaking out and he started tweeting bad quality stuff. So his life started to kind of crumble, and he was really desperate to have us back again, but I didn't want to be involved in that. And yeah, we stopped talking a few years ago, obviously. I mean, if we spoke now, he'd be like, he said he'd like knock me out in a video a few days ago or something. So it'd be pretty bad. But he's, you know, he's
a convicted criminal, and he's very violent. I'm sure he'd disagree with this. I'm always keen to debate Tommy Robinson on these issues. So yeah, if he's brave enough, I'm more than happy to have him on. Tell us about Future Freedom, the de-radicalization organisation that you're working with.
Well, I realized by talking to a bunch of people that were still involved in right-wing circles in America and the UK recently, I'd done a bit of a reach out to them, why they were still doing it when I knew a lot of them knew it was nonsense. And literally the main theme of all of it was because no one else has been able to walk away, and they don't know if it's possible to live a normal life afterwards. You could go and be a neo-Nazi or a far-right extremist in the 1980s, and you could walk away and no one knows that you were ever involved in it because it was in the local paper and then it gets thrown in the bin. We live our lives on the internet now, and it's there forever. And a huge number of people are terrified to walk away. They think they'll never be able to get a job again, or they think they'll never be accepted. That's the most important thing. And I think for me, it's not about changing their mind and saying, well, actually, these ideologies are X, Y, and Z, because a lot of them already know it's nonsense. It's about showing them stories and accounts from people that have walked away and been able to reconnect with their family and been able to reconnect in the real world and been able to go and live normal lives. And then it's also about providing resources about how the far right is funded, how it's all connected, how YouTube's algorithms drive 90% of all of it, and they give it to people that aren't even looking for it. Me typing in Orlando wasn't me trying to look for far right content. It was me trying to get information about Orlando. I didn't want any of this, and they gave it to me. So it's about exposing how that works as well, and just providing that resource. And of course, if people are vulnerable or people are in a position where they need help or they need counseling, we'll give those people's details to groups that are already set up to deal with that. Groups like Life After Hate or Exit UK that have those systems in place. But it's been incredibly successful. We've had hundreds of people reach out already, from the Proud Boys, from the Tommy movement, who feel disenfranchised by it, who don't really know what's going on, and who just want a bit of advice on where to go next and how to reconnect with their family and go and live normal lives. And for me, that's great, because it's literally reducing the physical size of the far right and the people that are involved in building it, watching it, and creating it.
Yeah, and Tommy Robinson's an opportunist, wasn't he? He was somebody who took advantage of people's sincere held views about they wanted the country to be protected from terrorism. They wanted their way of life to be protected as well, and took advantage of that. What would you say to people who say that you're now an opportunist? You've seen that the gravy train has left the station in terms of monetary value from the far right, and now you're kind of changing your tune on this.
Well, I'd say that's fine. I made minimum wage working for Tommy. He made £1 million. I gave all this information to The Independent to show them that I was making no money working for him, while he made an incredible amount. And I'm making no money from talking about this now. A lot of people on the right say, oh, you're in The Independent, you're obviously making loads of money. The Independent don't pay for stories.
I'll just confirm. Kelly, can I just confirm for the record, we've not paid you either.
I've not made any money to talk about any of this ever, and I've made a point about doing that. I've been offered money to talk about things, and I've made a point about doing it for free, because I also believe that by profiting now, talking about it is in some way profiting still from the far right because of its connections. So I'm absolutely against all of that. There is no financial benefit to any of this, and there's also no PR benefit to my reputation. It's not great for me, but it dismantles the far right. And
because
I mean, we all
sometimes
know
people forget. Sorry, Caolan. People forget how dangerous it is for people like you and Ivan Humble and others who've left the far right to speak up, because you can be threatened, you can have violence towards you, your loved ones can be under siege. We know you can get knocked at the door at 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's never done easy what you've done. I'm very brave. Let me ask you the final question, sir. What does the future hold for you?
I don't know. I've never thought about it. I just want to keep making great content, keep making great videos of Byline TV about disinformation, being part of a proper progressive ecosystem that exists in Britain that can dismantle a lot of this stuff, and just keep doing what I'm doing, I guess.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much. I just want to say, really, thank you for joining us and sharing your story. And I'm really glad that you're in a better place, buddy, working to help others get out of that nasty, vicious, racist, xenophobic hole. And I wish you well, sir. Keep safe. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having this conversation.
Thank you. That was Caolan Robertson, director of Byline TV and a former far-right activist, joining us there from London. When we come back, we've got a break in about an hour, but let me give you that breaking news that's come out in the last hour. The Joint Committee for Vaccination and Immunisation, the JCVI, has been having a press briefing in the last hour or so in which they, into the AstraZeneca, remember the AstraZeneca vaccine, there was concerns around blood clotting amongst young people. They've now said that for those aged between 18 and 29, you should use another vaccination, something like Pfizer or Moderna or Johnson & Johnson, all the other vaccinations that are coming have been approved. So work on that. What we'll do, we'll take a break. When we come back, we want to talk about the Batley Grammar School and that cartoon now. We'll be talking to Imran Shah, who is the CEO of Muslim Public Affairs Committee, the Aftermath. Join us on the other side of these very important messages. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Questions with me, Mohammed Shafiq, at this new time of 4:30 p.m. every Wednesday due to Ramadan coming up. So we thank you and hope it's not too much trouble. The new time of 4:30 will be on air for the next 4 or 5 weeks, and then inshallah after Ramadan we'll be back to our normal time, I hope, of 8:30 each evening. We were talking there to Caolan Robertson, director of Byline. Thank you so much to Caolan for joining us. Now, when I first heard about the Batley Grammar School incident where a teacher showed an offensive far-right photograph of the Charlie Hebdo magazine depicting Holy Prophet Muhammad with a bomb in his turban, I was very upset, as were many Muslims around the world, because, as you know, photographs depicting the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, are forbidden in Islam. How could a school teacher who lived amongst Muslims, taught Muslim children, and know that the hurt, and was a religious education teacher, the hurt that would cause them? I then spent the next 48 hours reacting to it on various media networks, because I see it as my duty as a Muslim to speak up, and as a broadcaster with the right and the opportunity to be able to amplify the voice of people watching this program, and with access to that media, that I had a duty to speak out. And you may have seen the interviews I did with Julia Hartley Brewer of Talk Radio, where I was very difficult to get a word in edgeways. It was very biased. But I was expressing and exercising my freedom of speech, which my opponents really don't want me to have. They want us to be silenced. And for that, we will not do that. The double standards are sickening, but not surprising for those on the right. Is this about freedom of speech? Or is this about respect and tolerance? Now, Batley Grammar School have said in a statement last week, we're grateful for the constructive engagement with all our stakeholders over the last few days. We believe the right way forward is now for an independent investigation to review the context in which the material which caused offence were used, and to make recommendations in relation to the religious studies curriculum so that the appropriate lessons can be learnt and action taken where necessary. We understand everyone will want clarity as soon as possible so that we can confirm. We expect to be able to announce that we've appointed an independent investigation panel over the next 2 weeks, with the investigation commencing on April the 12th, and anticipate the investigation outcomes towards the end of May. Now, the Muslim Public Affairs Committee was set up in 2005 to provide British Muslims with the knowledge, skills and support to raise their voice. Championing the Muslim voice in mainstream media is a core part of their work, according to their description on their website. Imran Shah is the CEO of MPACUK UK, and I'm pleased he's joining us live from the greatest city here in the UK, Manchester. Imran, a very warm welcome to the programme.
Hi, thanks for having me. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa assalam rahmatullah. When you heard about the showing of that cartoon, how did that make you feel?
I mean, as a Muslim, obviously our gut reaction is like, what are you playing at? Like, this is a school of all places. This should be a safe place in which Muslim pupils of all pupils really should be able to learn comfortably. So when you have essentially a cartoon from, like you say, a white supremacist, racist, Islamophobic magazine, it's like, that shouldn't be happening in a school. But what's even more telling, and if we look at the reports that are from the parents and that was reported in the Telegraph and New Statement, is that it's not just the image, it's also what the teacher said. So the teacher obviously said before he showed the image that he warned the students that you may find this offensive, which shows he knew it was going to be offensive. But he actually asked, on top of that, who is to blame? The cartoonist for causing offence, or the person who killed the French teacher for showing that? So if the cartoon isn't bad enough, the question makes it even worse.
Yeah,
and we have to understand.
So just going to say, Imran, I mean, obviously this is what's been reported. It's not been confirmed. Yes. There's an investigation going on, so it's alleged comments from this teacher.
Yes. Yeah, so like I said, it's what's alleged from the parents themselves. So if that is the case, then, and if that was the case, that the teacher did ask that question, like you said, it is a racist, Islamophobic cartoon. But that question gives no room to express that reality. A Muslim pupils already
end up getting referred to Prevent, then, don't you?
Exactly.
And that's the other scary thing.
Exactly. So, they're already terrified because Prevent is looking at them, and they're not going to express their view. But on top of that, they've got a provocative image that's insulting their faith and their identity. And they're ultimately made to pick a side. Are you a moderate Muslim or an extremist Muslim? Now, and this is an important point, that if teachers in schools are asking those type of lessons, the kind of questions that we get asked by the Daily Mail and racists like Boris Johnson, then there's something implicitly wrong in the way that they're being taught.
Yeah, and let's put that question. Now, we want to get the other side of the story as well. And so hopefully over the next few weeks, we're trying to get in touch with the other side. So they're given a fair opportunity here on British Muslim TV. So you get to see both sides in terms of what the arguments are. But let me ask you, Imran Shah, are you opposed to freedom of choice for teachers to teach about blasphemy in the classroom and use images as they see fit?
So, and this is the thing, is that if you are going to talk about blasphemy, historically or in contemporary terms, there are better ways to do it in a way that you're not bringing hate speech into the classroom. Yeah. So, no. So
how would you do it? How would you, if you were in that classroom situation, you want to talk about blasphemy, you want to talk about free speech and all the conversations that you want to have with a group of school kids, how would you have done it?
So what you can do is talk about in terms of the historical nature of blasphemy here in Christian Europe and other places. You can talk about it in terms of the tensions of freedom of speech around religion, around other sort of protected characteristics. You can do that in a very academic, very contextual, very reflective way. That cartoon, or any, like it's like if you had blackface, if you had a cartoon of blackface, and you talked about the issue, the tensions between free speech and racism, that would just create national outcry, especially after Black Lives Matter, and probably even before that. Like, you're talking about something that would not be tolerated. If you had anti-Semitism, a cartoon of anti-Semitism, it would not be tolerated whatsoever. So there are ways to talk about the historical nature of anti-Semitism, of racism, and the contemporary ways of freedom of speech. That is being done in other schools, and what's being done in Batley is just, it's not on it to even think about how we would do that. There are multiple ways of doing that. Any clear-minded person would know that. But you know, it's very interesting that it's not even just one teacher. This is something that has been repeatedly being done in previous years by the same school. Yeah,
there's lots of allegations around potentially that we know of 2 additional teachers who've now been suspended. So that's 3 people in total, and obviously there's an investigation, and we should obviously allow the space for them to do that. But just tell us, why are the depictions of the Holy Prophet ﷺ forbidden in Islam?
So, I mean, I'm not a scholar, but
essentially, in your education, in terms of your knowledge, if you have any on that.
So, I mean, as far as I personally know, it's because, well, I mean, all like we've seen with the depictions of Isa alayhi Islam, like how it's been politicized throughout the centuries. We've seen how you know, the issue around idolatry and like, you know, various different you know, possibly messengers or saints or whatever else are being depicted, and that leads to worship of them rather than creator. There's a whole host of sort of theological reasons, but I mean, for me as MPACUK, really the focus for me is the political nature of this. Like, again, you know, like I say, it's hate speech. So
let's get to that point, because I know we're going to get a break in between. And so let's talk about the political nature of this. What did you make of the protesters who were protesting at the gates outside that school? And then what did you make of the politicians who were attacking the protesters by calling them extremists? And there was a big row, if you like. There's 2 debates going on, if you like. One about the protesters, one about the issue. What did you make of all of that and the politicians' reactions to that?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's interesting because at the same time, you had protests in Bristol that are protesting against the bill that's going through Parliament, the controversial bill that's in Parliament. So at the same time, they were essentially legitimate protests, but Muslims who are protesting against this, again, there was no reports of any violence or any aggression whatsoever. They were just having a standing protest. Suddenly, they're now extremists. And, you know, obviously, people like you and I are used to that double standards. But so, you know, they should be. And it's interesting, like, how, you know, papers like The Telegram, politicians like Sajid Javid and so on, they're supporting, you know, cartoons like Charlie Hebdo. Like, if you didn't know what kind of makeup these type of people are, you know that they're essentially justifying racism and the expression of white supremacy by demonization of Muslims. So that's clear cut. But what I would say is that our response to that, and I don't know if the protesters themselves or other people, you know, our immediate response to that, to Sky News and to various other reports, the focus was on our feelings, and that's not where our focus should be. Like we've said, like, these cartoons, they incite and they justify violence upon Muslims on the street, state-sanctioned Islamophobic policies, justifying genocide, and even destroying the confidence of Muslims to politically resist that.
But would you then condemn any protesters? And to be fair, I've not seen anything in terms of anybody threatening violence. But if there had been any threats of violence, would you condemn that?
Yeah, of course. But, like, I mean, that's not when it's not a protest anymore. That's something else. We know it's a clear protest. It's a standing protest.
I smiled because you just made it really simple and explaining it in the most simplest way. Well done.
Thanks. But like, I mean, it's clear cut. Like, they tried their best to demonize those Muslim protesters. But like, we have to be absolutely clear when we are responding to this. We're not explaining our personal feelings about this. We need to elaborate on the structural discrimination that's happening. When they demonize our faith and our prophet, peace be upon him, they're demonizing us. And that's the way. That's the way. It's the exact same mechanisms as racism. So anyone who hasn't been, in my point of view, anybody who hasn't been paying attention to that in the last 20 years, it doesn't understand that reality. And for me, it's still quite shocking that we're still talking about our feelings and not the structural nature of this whole discrimination.
And that structural conversation that you're talking about is what I want to talk to you about, what MPAC UK has been doing, and what we as Muslims should be doing in terms of reacting to these sort of situations. Imran Shah, you're going to stay with us. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue to talk about what was being going on in Batley Grammar School, and then talk to Imran Shah about how we can equip our Muslims to tackle these issues. Join us on the other side of these important messages. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to questions. Sorry, I forgot what my programme was there. I spend so much time on TV at the moment, it's really hard to keep up. So yeah, this is questions. I'm Mohammed Shafiq, this is British Muslim TV, and my special guest, who's doing some fantastic work, is Imran Shah, the CEO of MPACUK, UK, which is Muslim Public Affairs Committee. Now, Imran, I've known you for a number of years, and your predecessors as well, I've known them for years. Much of the conversation that we've always had is MPACT has always been about equipping Muslims with the knowledge, the skills to raise their voices, to be involved and to hold the powerful to account. Do you think by protesting shows our community that we've failed to have that knowledge and skills to take on these issues?
Yes, perhaps yes and no. I mean, like, what's been positive, before I talked about a key negative about the narrative, but what's been positive is that there's been people engaging with the school using a soft relational campaign techniques, and there's been those that have been out there protesting using hard campaign techniques. You always need soft and hard, and ideally they should be working together. But what is quite astounding is that when you look at like Muslim councillors around the area, if not more regionally, and when you look at Muslim MPs, they haven't spoken out on this. And
they've spoken out and they've attacked the protesters.
Yeah, exactly. And so maybe that's just because of narrative, but the fact that there's a clear sort of like focus on the feeling as opposed to the structural discrimination. But they're political animals themselves. They should know better, and they should be able to essentially shape that narrative in the way that they have done on other issues like Kashmir and so on. So that's their job. So if they're failing, then the Muslim communities need to take note of that, and the Muslim communities need to demand and demand better from their representatives. Yeah. Otherwise, they're going to essentially lose their vote. And in places like Batley and Bradford and Leeds, Muslim vote is powerful. And so, if the Muslim community mobilizes, organizes to have better representation, they'll have it, but they need to do so.
Yeah, because that's the point, isn't it? You're not represented in the room where those decisions are being made. So therefore, you don't have any influence over that decision making, and therefore you're left to just protest outside and allow people to take pots at you. And that's the reason why I asked that question.
Yeah. I mean, in that way, yes, you can see obviously that if there was clear representation, that there probably wouldn't be a need to protest. Like we've seen this is, allegedly, the same school had done the same sort of incidents in the past. The kids have told the parents there was no protest, and I guess this is just the last straw that on the camel's back. People got sick of it.
Absolutely, you're right, Imran. I spoke to two different parents, who told me that exact same thing as what you've just said. We tried to have this dialogue with the school and it wasn't happening. But obviously, there's an investigation, and we'll see what lessons can be learned from that. Let's open the lines and see if colleagues and friends viewers want to take some questions. Yeah, 01924 231 Now, you, as part of MPAC UK, you opened an action alert after the Batley School for people. Tell us about that. What did you want to achieve by it?
So one of two things. One is that we wanted to get clear that what was happening in Batley, it's a possible breach of the Equalities Act by the school. This is not just a a simple thing. This kind of legal consequences, and that's how severe it is tantamount to hate speech, possibly on an institutional level. That was the one thing, getting the messaging and the narrative clear about that. And two, we want Muslims to essentially, make that case across and have two clear demands to the school. One is that they need to essentially clean up their curriculum, make sure that there's nothing, whether it's in the religious education curriculum or otherwise, that is tantamount to hate speech at all, across all protected characteristics. And two, essentially take the disciplinary sort of measures that's needed against the teachers that have used them in this current state and the past. So anything as well, in addition, that can be used to, bring the trust for the parents that go to the school and, involve them in the process. Okay. So those were the two sort of key things that we wanted to achieve. Yeah,
sorry to interject there. We've got a call. We've got quite a few calls waiting, so let's see if we can take the first. Let's go to Warrington. There's a brother there. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Oh, I recognise the voice. Is Shoaib Malik from the Muslim Action Forum. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good.
Well, just tell us, you coordinated that letter of 130 imams that was sent to the Prime Minister. Tell us about that letter, Shoaib.
I didn't actually coordinate it. It was a collected effort by the ulama, and using it under the Muslim Action Forum platform, because we needed a united voice to get the message across to the Prime Minister. And the letter basically borders on what is being discussed now. That you have the laws in place, others, have protection against xenophobia, anti-Semitism, etc. Why is it that Muslims each and every time are subject to this abuse, especially now? And the letter asks the Prime Minister really stand in solidarity with British Muslims. And
I just got one more question for you, Shoaib, and I promise you, hopefully, inshallah, over the next few weeks, if you're up for it, I'll get you in as a guest and we could talk a bit more details about this. Tell me, what do you make of the reaction from Muslim MPs and Muslim politicians, or the lack of it, as Imran Shah was there telling us about?
As Brother Imran has just said, and you've seen yourself, Brother Shafiq, is abysmal. And I would appeal to all the viewers now that elections are up in May, and this is a matter of Iman. Lobby your MPs, lobby your councillors, and ask them, why are you not actually speaking up against this? I'm sure you're aware that we've done a letter which has a link which can be used. There's a template on the Muslim Action Forum website, www.muslimactionforum.com. Is a template which can be used. All you have to do is just copy and paste it and send that across to your MPs and councillors.
Well, thank you.
And simply, Brother Shafiq, if we don't get our act together now as Muslims united in the UK, this is going to have very far-reaching consequences. This was just testing the waters, and what is shocking now is that reports coming in. This is not a single isolated incident at the school. It's happened before, but
that's the allegation.
It's happened at other schools as well, under the guise of freedom of expression.
Yeah, that's the allegation, and that's the debate that we want to have. Hopefully, if you're up for it, Shoaib, we'll get you on, inshallah, as a guest in the weeks to come. But thank you so much to you.
Thank you, and very good. And salam to Brother Imran, to yourself for having this program and for creating the awareness, brother.
Thank you so much, and inshallah get you on very soon. Now, Imran, let me ask you that question which Shoaib Saab there asked or talked about. Is there a way to bridge the divide between freedom of speech and respect for faith and figures?
Yeah, and that largely happens in the academic space, where there is a certain standard of academic sort of rigor and standards. So, I mean, it does happen. It happens very often in those spaces. And that's where it should be happening in places like universities and schools and so on. So again, it goes back to, why is this happening in a school, of all space, an academic institution? So it's not like we don't, people can't criticize, but what they can't do is use something as crass as Charlie Hebdo. That's like a red line, and it's that's the line that we should essentially draw. Yes, okay, we'll have our own sort of internal religious obviously we don't want there to be our faith to be essentially debated as truth sometimes, but that's the society that we live in, that's the world that we live in ever since Revelation, and that's been the case. But it's when it becomes to a point of demonization and inciting violence, that's a red line that we must stand against, and that's a line that we can essentially gain allies around as well.
There's so much more I want to talk to you about, and as often happens in these interviews, we tend to run out of time. I've got less than 5 minutes. I just wanted to ask you, 3 minutes. So it's amazing how fast time flies. My final question, I know you're happy to come on again and do a bit more detailed. Well, what outcome do you want to see from this independent inquiry?
So, I mean, there has to be a complete cleansing of hateful material from curriculum. Demands around the teacher, they have to be disciplined. If they're not willing to have a full, open and sincere apology, then they have to be essentially removed from the school. There's no trust. So that's the inquiry. But from us as the Muslim communities, we need to look inside ourselves as that, how is it that we get organized in a way that we essentially are not vulnerable, isolated, and in a way that we're not politically illiterate, so that if this happens again, if they do test us again, we're going to essentially organize much more strongly than this time.
And how can people get involved, and how can people get in touch with your organisation? Just give us that plug.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get involved, volunteer, then please message us on Facebook, our Facebook page, or Twitter at MPACUK, MPACUK. And yeah, we're happy to help out and for you to contribute and to get involved where possible.
Yeah, well, Imran Shah, thank you so much for coming on the programme. From all of us here, British Muslim TV, Ramadan Kareem, and best wishes for your work, and look forward to welcoming you back.
Jazakallah, and for you.
Thank you so much. That was Imran Shah from the Muslim Public Affairs Committee, UK, joining us live there from Manchester, the other side of the Pennines of where I am. We'll reach the end of the programme. Now, next week as Ramadan starts, we'll still be on the new time of 4:30. We'll be going to Dubai to talk to Ali Salama on his work tackling mental health. Rabina Khan is joining us from the Liberal Democrats on the coming elections on May the 6th and what are the expectations in terms of the Liberal Democrats. And as I said, over the next few weeks, we'll talk to all the politicians, political leaders, and then we'll have Shafaqat Mohammed and Pervez Khan debate the state of Pakistani politics. That's going to be interesting. If you ever watch Pakistan politician debates on some of the Pakistani news channels, you'll find that's interesting and colourful. Let's see if we can replicate that in a nice, respectful sort of way here on Questions. We'll be obviously at the earlier time of 4:30 every Wednesdays in Ramadan because of obviously the big charity show. We'll be off finishing in less than 30 seconds. I'll be back in about an hour's time with the big charity show where you'll be hearing from Penny Appeal. But everybody here at British Muslim TV, Ramadan is starting next week. Have a blessed Ramadan. I'll see you same time next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.